All right, guys. So we got to talk about Trump and Mitch McConnell once again, as Trump has went after Mitch for allowing the Democrats to pass the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now, Trump is upset about this, and he's upset about this for multiple reasons. In my opinion, I think one of the first reasons is probably because Mitch McConnell was one of the main reasons why he could not get infrastructure spending done under his administration. Now, Trump ran on infrastructure spending. That was one of his main promises to America. We're going to rebuild America. But instead, the Republicans, led by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, said, no, we would rather have tax cuts and try to repeal Obamacare. Which, look, there's an argument to be made that maybe their priorities were out of line, at least when it comes to the whole repeal and Obamacare thing over infrastructure, because infrastructure is bipartisan, right? I think that even the Democrats, I think to a certain extent, agreed with Trump more on infrastructure spending at the time than Republicans did. And obviously repealing Obamacare was something that the Republicans had to try to do by themselves, which failed. Okay, so I think Trump here is reasonably upset at Mitch McConnell because Mitch McConnell didn't go along with his plans for infrastructure at the time in which it could have been done in a bipartisan way, which would have been a major win for the Trump administration. And who knows? I mean, that could have been a factor that could have helped him win the presidency in 2020, right? So I understand why Trump is upset. And then the second part is that Mitch McConnell allowing the bipartisan infrastructure bill to pass in the Senate gave leeway for it to pass in the House, and ultimately could lead to the Democrats passing the larger $1.75 trillion Build Back Better plan, which means that Biden not only gets one major legislative win, but also two, right? Which could save his presidency, right? I mean, theoretically. I mean, I'm not sure if this legislation is really going to change people's minds, because there will be no immediate impact. We won't really know how good this bill actually is, and until probably 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, right? When the money gets spent on projects, we will see whether or not it's actually wasted, whether it went to projects that actually had a positive return on investment. We really won't know, right? But until then, Trump is kind of getting on Mitch McConnell here for what he sees as a strategic legislative mistake, right? Which could be possible here, especially if the Democrats end up passing his $1.5 trillion Build Back Better plan. But regardless, let's read here about Mitch McConnell and Trump and what Trump is saying about him. Because again, I think Trump is making some solid points here in regards to a few things. So let's go ahead and get into this. Former President Donald Trump slammed Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on Wednesday for allowing the passage of the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, warning House and Senate Republicans to vote against the second part of the President Biden agenda, big spending agenda. In a statement released by his leadership PAC, Save America, the Republican former president reiterated his growing disdain for Mitch McConnell, trashing him once again as a broken old crow. Quote, it actually costs over $2 trillion, but the bigger disaster is yet to come in the next much larger version of the Green New Deal, which some people will say will be $5 trillion. This was all allowed by Mitch McConnell's incompetence, Trump said, before claiming that a couple of Republican senators may vote in favor of the larger $1.7 trillion sweeping social package, also known as the Build Back Better Act. Trump also slammed McConnell's decision to give a 2-month extension for the debt limit in October, which allowed the Democrats to get their act together and to pass the infrastructure bill, which Trump called a disaster for America while comparing it to the Green New Deal. Okay, so what Trump is trying to say here is that, well, Mitch McConnell, in virtue of allowing the bipartisan infrastructure bill to pass, he's also going to allow the Build Back Better plan to pass as well, right? And, I've done a lot of analysis on what Mitch McConnell may have been thinking when he actually allowed the bipartisan infrastructure bill to pass, like at the last minute, the Republicans got on board and voted for it. I think the reason why he did it, right, what Mitch McConnell is thinking is that, well, infrastructure spending is bipartisan, right? Both sides want it as long as it's done right? Republicans, particularly, they wanted to be spent on infrastructure. But I think the way he was looking at it as well, if we sign on to this, at the very least, come midterms or 2024, we can say that, listen, we work with the Democrats. We're willing to actually sign up for legislation that makes sense to us. We're not just obstructing to be obstructing. And I think that that's what Mitch McConnell was coming from. Because, in my opinion, I don't see why he didn't want to do infrastructure spending under Trump, but then turn around and do it under Biden when we're experiencing massive inflation, right? His whole thing under Trump was that, well, it's not paid for, it's not paid for. That was his excuse, right? Which I don't think is a bad excuse. I just think that you either have to figure out a way to pay for it, okay, one, or two, you don't turn around when the Democrat gets in office and all of a sudden you want to sign up for infrastructure spending. So I think some of it is him wanting to get a bipartisan victory or have the Republicans appear to be bipartisan. And some of it really, I think, is probably to spite Trump and be like, well, I didn't do it under you, but hey, you know what? I'm going to do it under Biden because F you, right? I kind of low-key think that's what Mitch McConnell's doing to a certain extent. He's trying to spite Trump by signing up for this bill, knowing that Trump really wanted it under his administration. Democrat House leadership is looking to put Biden's $1.7 trillion Build Back Better bill to vote this week and pass it after Thanksgiving in the Senate through a parliamentary process called reconciliation that will require no GOP votes. Given Republican and some moderate Democrat pushback in recent months, it is unlikely any Republican in either chamber will vote for the bill. But 5 House Democrats said they cannot vote for the Biden bill until they see a Congressional Budget Office appraisal of its true cost and how it is paid for, as well as the projected effects on the economy. Moderate Democrats Stephanie Murphy of Florida, Ed Case of Hawaii, Josh Gottenheimer of New Jersey, Kathleen Rice of New York, and Kurt Schreider of Oregon refused to vote in favor of the bill earlier this month, but did tentatively promise to back it in its current form if the score is revealed this week. On the Senate side, Democrats have faced pushback from moderate Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, who battled the bill's top line for weeks. Most recently, Manchin has continued to push back the progressive fight to include paid family leave in the legislation. All right, so that's also another component of it, right, in terms of what Mitch McConnell was thinking. In my opinion, there's no way that Mitch McConnell signed up for the bipartisan infrastructure bill unless he got a promise or a strong indication from Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, that under no circumstances would they sign up for, at the time, was a $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan. So I don't necessarily know if that applies to the watered down version, right? The 1.75 trillion. I'm not sure if Mitch McConnell was calculating in the chance that they will water it down and get something that's much less. Who knows? Maybe that could have been a part of it. I don't know, right? But what I do know is that Mitch McConnell, in my opinion, he probably is thinking that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are going to continue to hold out no matter what. And that's kind of what it looks like. However, again, if this thing comes up for a vote soon here, we're going to find out if they're actually willing to stick to their guns. Last week, the CBO released initial estimates on 8 parts of the bill. So far, the agency has found that one of those 8 sections, if included in the final legislation, would increase the federal budget deficit by more than $150 billion. The White House is reportedly expecting the CBO to find that the bill will not pay for itself, according to the New York Times, and is telling lawmakers to disregard the full assessment when it is released. On Wednesday, Trump claimed if McConnell wasn't so stupid and hadn't agreed to the extension, he could have stopped it all. Now, this is kind of true. But, at the same time, the trade-off would have been that the Democrats would have been forced to vote to get rid of the filibuster when it came to increasing the debt limit, right? And that in and of itself has ramifications in the future, because now progressives in the media are now going to get on the Democrats and say, okay, you guys got rid of the filibuster for this. Why don't you just get rid of the filibuster for all this other legislation that you can't pass, right? So I think that, McConnell here was making a calculated decision at the time. However, I think the dynamic that has changed is that because the Democrats lost Virginia unexpectedly, now they're like, okay, we need to do something, right? We have to pass something. We have to show that we're doing something because we are losing, right? I think if the Democrats had won Virginia, I think that there would not have been as much urgency to get that bill passed. right? I think that you saw the bill immediately pass after Virginia because of the new sense of urgency, knowing that they're now losing. But at the same time, back to the debt ceiling thing, I mean, that's a double-edged sword. If McConnell would have let the Democrats just kind of do their thing when it came to debt ceiling, one, they could have got rid of filibuster, which could have led to other stuff. Or two, I mean, they could have just let the country default, which probably would have been blamed on Republicans, right? So I don't know, man. I mean, I hear what Trump's saying, but I don't necessarily think that McConnell was making a bad move when it came to the debt ceiling thing. I think that you can't let the country default, right? You just can't let that happen. That hurts everybody. But who knows? I mean, most likely Democrats would have used something to try to extend it. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would have used reconciliation. They probably just would have got rid of filibuster for it, which would have had its own issues in the future, like I've been saying. But, quote, this is the broken old crow's fault, Trump emphasized, saying Democrats were ready to fold with the debt ceiling in October. Using the debt ceiling like it should have been used, you old broken crow, to do so would have hurt the country far less than this horrible bill, Trump said before issuing a warning to the entire GOP. Any Republican in the House or Senate who votes for this bill will never, ever get a Trump endorsement. Thank you and good luck. Following the passage of the infrastructure bill, Democratic leadership promised a vote on the Build Back Better Act for the week of November 15th. The CBO report is expected to be fully released by Friday, making a Saturday vote on the bill possible. All right, so, yeah, we're going to see, right, if Mitch McConnell's gamble here pays off, right? Because if they do happen to pass this $1.7 trillion Build Back Better plan, then McConnell's going to look like an idiot. Because people are going to say, well, why'd you sign up for a bipartisan bill in the first place, right? If you knew that it was going to lead to this or it could possibly lead to this. I think that in Mitch McConnell's calculations, he did not see Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema getting on board with it. But at this point, because the bill has been so watered down, they may fold to the pressure. Doesn't look like it, but we still don't really know yet. But regardless, I think Trump has some good points here in regards to how Mitch McConnell has signed up for this infrastructure bill now, and they didn't do it under his administration. And the fact that, yeah, I mean, him doing this, him kind of giving Joe Biden a win here, could possibly give the Democrats an out, especially if they can pass this, again, $1.7 trillion bill, and could possibly save his presidency, right? It can be something he can point to and say, hey, look, I did it, right? Even though, we really don't know if this bill is going to be good for the country until years down the road when they actually have spent the money on the things that they say they're going to spend money on. I have my doubts about it. Spending trillions of dollars at one time is probably not a good idea, and there's always going to be some inefficiencies, and the money's going to be wasted on all types of pet projects and stuff like that. But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.